The canyon was a labyrinth of jagged rocks and shadowed cliffs, the kind of place where silence wasn't peaceful, it was oppressive. The sun had begun its descent, painting the sky with streaks of fire and gold, and casting long, cruel shadows over the desert floor. Somewhere deep within this vast expanse, a faint, strained cry echoed off the stone walls, barely audible over the whisper of the wind. The sound belonged to a young Apache girl, no older than 17, whose chest heaved with each painful breath. She was pinned under a fallen boulder, her arm twisted at an impossible angle, a streak of blood cutting across her forehead, and dust coating her once bright clothing. She didn't scream, not because she wasn't in agony, but because she had pride, and because she feared the only people around might not care. From the ridge above, a lone cowboy cautiously picked his way down the slope. His boots crunched over loose stones, and his hand rested instinctively on the butt of his revolver. The man was rough-hewn, with a shadow of a beard and eyes that had seen more death than hope. But there was something in his posture, a careful, hesitant patience, that told of someone who had learned to weigh each action like a gamble he couldn't afford to lose. He spotted the girl immediately, the crimson streak against the brown and gray of the canyon, hard to miss. He froze. A sudden movement, the subtle curl of her fingers, the tilt of her head toward the sun, told him she was alive and conscious. The girl's eyes met his across the distance, sharp and unafraid despite her predicament. "Make it quick, cowboy," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I won't scream." Her words cut through the canyon air like a whip. There was no plea for help, no desperation, just a calm, measured demand. The cowboy blinked. It wasn't the words themselves that startled him. It was the way she said them. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't begging. She was issuing a challenge. And challenges, he had learned over the years, were never given lightly in the West. He approached carefully, stepping over jagged stones, eyes scanning for other dangers. In the back of his mind, he knew that the canyon could hide more than shadows, snakes, cliffs that crumbled without warning, and men who would see a lone girl as a prize. He reached her slowly, his hands extended, making sure to appear non-threatening. "Hey," he said, his voice low, steady. "I'm gonna help you, but you gotta trust me." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not with suspicion, but with the calculation of someone who knew that trust could be as dangerous as a rattlesnake. "Trust?" she rasped, coughing slightly, blood staining her lips. "Cowboy, I trust no one out here, least of all strangers with guns." He offered a faint, understanding smile. "Fair enough," he said. "I ain't asking for trust. Just let me get this rock off you." The boulder was heavier than it looked, wedged at an awkward angle that made any movement perilous. He knelt carefully, digging his fingers into cracks and crevices, testing each motion before committing to it. The girl shifted slightly, wincing but remaining surprisingly still. "Careful," she warned. "If that thing shifts the wrong way, it'll break me in half." Her tone had no panic, only a grim humor, a coping mechanism that the cowboy recognized immediately. Minutes stretched like hours as he leveraged the rock just enough to ease the weight off her chest. Dust fell in clouds, coating their skin and clothes. She gasped, the sound sharp in the canyon's quiet, and the cowboy felt the tension drain slightly from his shoulders. He was about to give her a hand to pull herself free when movement caught his eye, a glint of metal far above, where the canyon rim broke the horizon. His instincts screamed danger. "Stay down," he whispered. The girl's eyes followed his gaze. Two men, rough-looking and armed, were making their way along the ridge. The cowboy cursed under his breath. "Looks like trouble," he said softly. The girl's expression didn't change. "I was hoping it would be just you," she said, a smirk ghosting over her bloodied face. "But I guess fate has a sense of humor." He gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Fate's a son of a—" But there was no time to finish. The men on the ridge spotted them, and one raised a rifle. The cowboy shoved the girl behind a nearby outcropping, pulling her close as the first shot rang out. It wasn't aimed to kill, that much he could tell, but danger, as always, demanded respect. "You always get shot at, cowboy?" the girl asked, her tone dry, almost teasing despite the tremor of pain in her voice. Not usually by men I haven't met, he replied, shifting to get a better angle. But it's a first for a rescue mission, I'll give you that. Together, they ducked and moved through the shadows, the cowboy guiding her carefully, mindful of her injuries. Every step was calculated. Every movement could be the difference between life and death. The girl, despite her predicament, matched his pace with a surprising resilience. "You move too slow," she said at one point, winching as the boulder scraped against her leg. "We'll both be dead before we reach the creek." "You're moving fast enough for two," he shot back. "You just forget you're hurt." There was a moment of silence, filled only by the hiss of the wind through the canyon walls. In that silence, the girl's eyes softened just slightly, a flicker of trust, or maybe acknowledgement passing between them. "Cowboy," she said quietly, "if we get out of this, you can tell everyone you save me, but don't get attached. I'm not easy to save, or to keep alive." He shook his head, a wry grin tugging at his lips. "Noted," he said. "But if we don't get out of this, it won't matter anyway." They moved cautiously, navigating treacherous paths and hidden drops. The men on the ridge were relentless, keeping pace without ever fully exposing themselves. The canyon was a maze, but the cowboy knew it like the back of his hand. He led her toward a narrow passage that would take them down to the creek, a natural hiding place and potential escape route. As they descended, the girl's strength began to wane. Her breathing was shallow, and her hand trembled as she clutched his arm. "You sure you're not going to drop me?" she asked, her voice laced with humor and exhaustion. "I'm not a dropper," he said, keeping his tone light to mask the rising tension in his chest. "I've got you." The creek was finally in sight, a thin ribbon of silver winding through the canyon floor. The sound of running water was almost miraculous, a promise of temporary safety. But the cowboy knew it wasn't over. They would need to cross it carefully, and the men on the ridge wouldn't give up easily. He set her down gently on a flat rock by the water, helping her clean the worst of the blood and dust from her face. "You're stronger than you look," he admitted. "Strength doesn't always mean smart," she replied, a faint smile breaking through her pain. "But I'll take the compliment." Then she paused, her expression turning serious. "Cowboy, if anyone asks who I am, don't tell. And whatever happens next, remember this. Some debts can't be repaid with bullets or gold. They can only be settled with courage and maybe a little luck." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it a sense of foreboding and promise. The creek's cool water reflected the fiery sky above, and for the first time since he'd found her, there was a glimmer of hope. Yet as shadows lengthened and the canyon darkened, both knew this was just the beginning. Danger lingered in every corner, and the girl's challenge still hung in the air: survive, escape, and confront the unknown.